This hearing will come to order. Madam Attorney General, we thank you for joining us today to discuss the President's recent executive actions. As chairman of this subcommittee, I believe that it is my duty to the American people to properly oversee the Department of Justice and ensure that any funding provided by this subcommittee is used as Congress intended and within the bounds of the Constitution. It's clear to me that the American people are fearful that President Obama is eager to strip them of their Second Amendment rights. Let me be clear. The Second Amendment is not a suggestion. It's an individual right protected in the Bill of Rights that has been recognized by the Supreme Court. And with that in mind, this morning I'm very concerned with the recent executive actions by the President for two main reasons. First, President Obama, I believe, is far too willing to end-run Congress through executive action. The President has said that he believes that when Congress doesn't act the way he wants us to, then he must act alone. Our Constitution won't allow for this kind of unilateral action, and the American people will not stand for it. Whether through executive amnesty to thousands of illegal immigrants or increased gun control measures, the President has unwisely, I believe, acted alone. However, what the President fails to remember is that we have a system of checks and balances. A system that was created to ensure that power was not concentrated in a single branch of the federal government. The President
Subcommittee with the 2017 budget, we do intend to, in our spend plan, send up information about the beginning of that process even this fiscal year. The law enforcement priorities of ATF at this point, consistent with the Smart on Crime plan, are in fact to focus on the violent crime issue that you have just described, to focus on individuals who terrorize neighborhoods, who harm children, who essentially through the unlawful possession of firearms, create a danger to law-abiding Americans seeking to live their lives in our vibrant cities. We are targeting not just the gun traffickers, but as my ATF director calls it, the trigger pullers, gang violence, places where we've seen an increase in violent crime. We are looking at ways to target our resources to focus on those individuals who are causing the most harm to our communities. So that
do you feel that this is also due, this rising gun violence, not to interrupt, is related to the growing heroin epidemic? In other words, what's happened in my city, which is just awful, with these over 350 dead. Not only the injured, God forbid, but the injured. But this is in every major city that this is going on. So it's just not like a Baltimore bubble. This seems to me like an epidemic that's hit our big urban areas.
Yes, ma'am, indeed. I believe that the phrase epidemic accurately captures the problem of the increase in heroin and opioid abuse that we are currently seeing. This is a problem in many of our urban areas, but I must say it has sadly spread across this country. There are many counties with various densities, even many rural areas, that are in the grip of an opioid and heroin epidemic. And with that often comes an increase in violence. There, our enforcement activities are focused on pairing ATF agents with DEA and FBI agents to target those criminal organizations that are bringing narcotics in and that are protecting the drug trade with their firearms.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Attorney General. My time is up. Senator Baldwin and I just left a hearing chaired by Senator Alexander and Vice Chair Senator Patty Murray on mental illness. Excellent panel, very excellent, superb witnesses. And I know that we're going to really talk about this issue of mental illness, people who are mentally ill getting drugs, this whole issue of privacy rights. What do you know? How do you stop? The Virginia Tech situation comes to mind, and we could go through other cases, but in Virginia Tech, that young man had been in and out of institutions. Who knew? Who could help? When do we intervene? So and just their ability to get these guns. We also had a shooting at a Columbia Mall. We all have shootings. That's what's so terrible. We all have shootings. And so I look forward to hearing your comments also on the mental illness aspect. But I know we have excellent other senators here and want to get to their questions. I'm going to hear their questions and your answers. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Senator Langford.
Good morning to you. Thanks
Good morning,
for being
Senator.
here, being a part of this. Let me bounce a couple questions off you that are timely as well. I served previously in the House of Representatives in the Oversight and Government Reform Committee. I was part of the committee when we went through the subpoena process to ask your predecessor for additional documents for the Fast and Furious investigation on guns. Those were delayed to us. Privilege was announced on that. As of yesterday, a court has told the Attorney General's office, hey, those documents need to be turned over by February the 2nd. I need clarification. Will all those documents now be released to the Oversight and Government Reform Committee by February the 2nd, as per the judge's order?
Well, thank you for the question, Senator. We did receive that ruling yesterday. We are still reviewing that ruling. I am aware of that provision in it. We, of course, want to study it carefully and determine what appropriate steps to take and the timeliness of them. But I can certainly assure you that we will be either responding to the committee or to the court at the appropriate time.
So you're not saying yes or no whether those documents will be turned over in time? And clearly they've been collected. They've been collected for years.
If we'll pursue any additional legal action. We have not made that decision. If we had, I would let you know. And since we have not, I'm not able to give you that information at this time.
Okay. Do you know when that answer will come back out?
We will let you know certainly within the time period that you've just mentioned.
Okay, one of the conversations that I had with your predecessor was on process issues with ATF and FBI. FBI and ATF have two different sets of processes for many investigations. Those can be combined to make sure that we have clear processes across DOJ on it. Do you know any kind of progress that's been made of late with ATF and trying to align with some of the FBI processes for how they do investigations in that process?
Well, Senator, I would need to know a bit more of the context of the processes you referred to, whether you're referring to either deconfliction or joint efforts. But if you could provide that, I'm happy to respond.
Be glad to. We'll try to follow up on that because that was an ongoing conversation that he and I agreed on, and that there was a process moving on that. Let me ask about some of the guidance, as you've mentioned several times, for the federal firearms licenses. The guidance that's come out seems to be the same as it was before, basically saying if you're in the business of dealing firearms, then yes, you have to be licensed. That's nothing new on it. What we're trying to get is what is the new definition. The previous definition for that seemed to change during the Clinton administration, actually, to have a lower number to say people that are kitchen table dealers that are actually selling to their neighbors or occasionally sell a firearm out of their own collection. They're not a licensed dealer. What we're trying to get is a clarification, who is a licensed dealer? When will that clarification come out of what you're proposing, and will it be a regulatory change or a guidance document?
Well, Senator, the guidance document that has been promulgated does exactly that. It answers the question that you have raised. It collects information from all the cases that have considered this issue and provides, through a series of clear examples, a definition for when someone is engaged in the business and when they are not. And you are correct in the sense that the definition has not changed because the statute has not changed.
Right.
We are simply gathering the case law, the legal definitions that have been promulgated by courts in situations where people have been found to be engaged in the business, and also where they have clarified the definition of the hobbyist and the collector, because those exceptions also are still part of the law. Hobbyists and collectors are not required to obtain a license in order to transfer firearms. But it's important to note that this information has been scattered in a number of cases throughout the country. And as I mentioned before, ATF was constantly and still anticipates receiving inquiries from individuals seeking to comply with the law, asking if their activities constitute being engaged in the business of dealing.
So what will be the clear rule as far as how many firearms that you sell in a year time period? Is it over a lifetime? Is it number in your collection? Is it based on the amount of income that you receive? What will be the clear guidance for them?
The courts have determined that a number of factors are used in determining whether or not one is engaged in the business. And they've specifically said that there's not a specific number that makes one meet that test. Instead, it is the totality totality of circumstances. And essentially, if one is repetitively selling firearms, if you hold yourself out as a dealer, if in fact you do intend to make a profit, all of these things go into that calculation. The courts give them different weight, but because the statute, as you know, does not contain a numerical
Correct,
requirement,
and
the
that's
guidance
what we're
doesn't
trying to get
follow.
at. See, there's a difference between a guidance and a regulation, as you know extremely well, and we're trying to find out if will be a rule promulgated in this or the guidance. I'll walk back through some of those details with you. I have one final question I find very important. The gathering of information that's going into the background checks, the interstate, what's called the Interstate Identification Index, is that information used for the criminal background check information as well? Excuse me, or only what's going into the National Criminal Background Check? What's the NICS search? Are both of them used, do you know?
You know, I'd have to get clarification on that for you. This particular recommendation that we've made to the President focuses on strengthening the NICS system.
Which is part of my concern on it as well, because this has been an issue. I don't find anyone here that says we shouldn't do background checks and that database shouldn't be very effective. But if I can have just the pleasure of the chairman for a moment, let me just run through a couple of our states. In the states that actually submit information into the NICS system, federally, if there's a federal conviction for a felony, that's going into the system right away. But if it's a state felony, as I look through the listing here, Alabama currently has 0 felonies. You'll be glad to know that, sir, running into the system. California has 4,032. You'll be glad to know that's all that's in California felonies. Delaware has 0. Maryland has 12. My fine state of Oklahoma has 1, a very law-abiding state, clearly. Rhode Island has 0, and Wisconsin has 106. That's not very many coming from our states into the NICS system. And so the question that I would have is, and I think there's been common agreement on, what's happening between the states that they're not submitting the information into the federal system, or is the federal system so complicated to get information into that our states of all stripes are not submitting that information?
Well, Senator, I think that you've raised a very important issue. As you know, after the Virginia Tech tragedy, the federal government did reach out to the states and request a greater influx of information into the NICS system. Federal agencies are required to report information into the NICS system. States do it on a voluntary basis. And in fact, in the years since the Virginia Tech shooting, the amount of information coming from all of our states has increased by approximately 70%.
Right, in mental health, but not in the felonies.
Well, it is increased by 70% across a number of categories, and I wouldn't be able to break that out for you. What I did do also quite recently, with the recommendations I provided to the President, I sent a letter to the governors of every state asking them to essentially look at their systems and processes and make sure that they were, in fact, setting up the most efficient systems to provide information to us. The Department of Justice also, through its grants programs, does provide support for states who need assistance in categorizing the types of offenses that need to be provided into NICS, and possibly also making their own systems consistent with NICS. And we will continue to do that. We look forward to working with our state partners on this. They are very important partners.
Right, and I would say, I know I've indulged the chairman's time, and I apologize for that and going a bit long on this question, but I would say this is an area of common ground where we could actually work together on this, and I look forward to that.
Senator Coons.
Thank you.